Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. Today, my guest is Mark Lewis, and we are going to talk because Mark has written a book called Give a Damn. So we're going to talk about giving a damn, but we're going to talk about a lot of other things too. But before we get into it all, Mark, I know just by looking at your website, being an author isn't the only thing that you do. So do you want to introduce yourself to everybody who might not know who you are?
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it. Mark Lewis, I was born and raised as an entrepreneur because my dad got me involved. And I went to Boston College and then got my MBA at Tulane. Then I worked for IBM for 13 years. But I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But it took me 13 years to really decide it because I got comfortable with working for IBM. They paid me well. I did very well, but I knew I always had that itch. So I went off and became an entrepreneur in 1994 and started an internet service provider. Did that for about 3 years because we knew companies were going to kind of acquire us because we were on the cutting edge. And then it just kind of evolved. I ran a nonprofit for 10 years because it was almost bankrupt. I took it over, wanted to do that, but I got back into the itch to being an entrepreneur. And then I decided to go off on my own with a consulting company, and that kind of all evolved. Eventually took it over. Now I moderate CEO roundtables. I've got my book that I'm marketing and promoting. I just started a new company. So I'm kind of around the gamut in terms of doing multiple things because that's just kind of my character and who I am.
I kind of love that, though, especially because one of the things I try to do with this podcast is to teach people you don't have to be just one thing. You can be really multifaceted. You can have interest in 5 or 6 different areas and turn them into parts of your career and your life. So I love that you have all of these things that you're relying on.
I really enjoy it. I'm not one that could just sit and do one thing at a time. So I like the multiple avenues of doing things. And it's really all about helping others to succeed and helping people. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I got into consulting. That's why I got into this new initiative. I help with an IT symposium every year, but it's just about helping other people become better at what they do. And that's what I enjoy most.
I love that. And that's why you wrote the book. So let's talk about the book, because I think the book is really important. We were talking before we started recording about how hard it can be to actually give a damn about things. So what exactly inspired you to write the book? Because writing a book is kind of a big undertaking.
Yes, Crystal, if you told me 10 years ago I was going to write a book, I'd say, you're absolutely crazy. I'm not a good writer. I never liked English in school. I don't write particularly well. I just saw all these things that people were doing, and I'm going, really? Are you really doing that? And I started recording all my observations on a little dictaphone recorder. And next thing I know, I had 60 pages of typewritten text of all these things. And then I kind of merged it all together, wrote the first version of the book, which I thought was really good, but then I realized it was terrible. So I had a journalist and a writer come in and kind of adapt my current thought process. And she did an unbelievable job in terms of turning it from the first version to the second version. And then I met a very strategic partner, Steve Gleason. He's a famous football player that got ALS. I got to know him really well. I asked him to write the opening foreword to my book. And I told him, look, Steve, if you do this, and he's a consummate, unbelievable individual. If you help me write the foreword to the book, I'll help you. We'll put it in there and I'll give you 20% of whatever I do in the sales of the book to help with his ALS foundation.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I really enjoy it because Steve is just unbelievable. He had a great career and just was unbelievable as a New Orleans Saints football player. And then, what he told me, which really hit home to me, he says, when I got ALS, you would think people would say that it was such a terrible disease, but it really gave me purpose in life. And that purpose was to help others who have ALS live a more quality life and to help find a cure for it. He said he was liberated. He wasn't confined to his wheelchair, but he's been liberated by it. So he's kind of a driver that helps me go around and get people to really understand what it means to give a damn.
I think that's so important because so often, especially in the world we've lived in the last couple of years with COVID and people being in lockdown and all these things around the world, we sort of end up with this tunnel vision of if things don't turn out exactly how we want them, life is horrible and people are not happy. But taking that different perspective, giving a damn, having someone be able to say, this isn't exactly what I envisioned, but it's given me a different avenue to explore and find purpose and meaning and walk through. That's huge.
It's really big. And what I found when today's society is we've become more of a self-centered society. It's all about, what can I do that's to my benefit? But people need to understand that when you do things for other people, it actually helps you because it makes you feel good, and it helps the other person because you're doing something that makes and improves their life. So if you can get that philosophy of what it means to give a damn externally, because most of the time, and I make this analogy, let's say you're walking across, I walked across the street and I kicked this rusty nail. Most people wouldn't pick up the rusty nail, but if the rusty nail was in the middle of your driveway, what would you do? You would pick it up because now you can internalize something that might affect you. So we have to get out this internal nature that we have inside and start doing what we do externally to the benefit of other people, and everybody's life improves. And that's the thing and the beauty about all the things that I put in this give a damn mentality. You can live longer. You create a happier life. And that's what we all want to be, happier. When you create a happier life, you improve your life, you live longer, you improve everybody else's lives. And so that's the whole benefit of this term, what I hope to be a movement called Give a Damn.
I love the idea of a movement because I think we've definitely, in my opinion, gotten away from that sort of mentality that my grandparents had when they were young, right? It was, you give a damn, you care about your neighbors, you care about your neighborhood, your community as a whole, because it improves the lives of you, your family, and everyone around you. And I think you're right. We've kind of gotten to this place where it really is just about like, what's going to benefit me personally? And you don't think about everything around you. As we were talking before we started recording, I've just recently moved into an apartment building in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the community feel to this building. People look out for each other. People ask if anyone needs help. People, pick up garbage together as they walk into the building from their parking lot spaces. Like that kind of community feel I didn't have where I lived back in Ontario. And I think it's such an important part of being a human because you feel not only like you're contributing to the world and to your personal space, but you're even just something as simple as a smile, you're improving someone else's day. And that's huge.
You bring up a lot of points that I could just relate to. When I go to the grocery store, someone asks me like, how are you? And I go, terrific. And they like, whoa, what's with this guy? But you know what happens? They have a smile on their face.
Right.
So now I've actually had an impact on somebody's life when they smile. Everything internal in the body, which we don't know anything about, happens that helps you, become or helps you feel better and actually reduce stress. Stress is the biggest disease maker on the human body. Stress causes a lot of disease. So if we can get away from stress by volunteering, by doing other good things for people. And you talked about back many years ago, grandparents and my parents, we had these duties and responsibilities. And now people think they have rights and privileges. And the communication aspect, we don't go face to face like we used to when I was growing up. And technology has played a huge part in that. And how do we get in front of people where we can talk to them and have this face-to-face conversation instead of sending emails or sending text messages? Because a lot of that communication can be lost in that. So in my book, I cover 9 areas of some of the things that have caused people to be less communicative, less interactive, less caring. All these things have contributed to us giving a damn less. So how do we get back to a selfless society versus a self-centered society? And that's my whole goal to do this with this book.
I love this. And I'm so happy you're turning it into a movement. So for everyone who is listening, I, of course, will post in the show notes a link to the book and the website so that you can find Mark, you can get the book, you can follow along. But Mark, for people who are listening, if they kind of feel the same way and, they're thinking to themselves, okay, well, how do I start giving a damn? Where do I begin? Because I feel overwhelmed. What advice would you have for them?
Well, the first thing you do is you just have to think about all what's going on in your life. A lot of times we just react without thinking, and that reaction can be sometimes self-centered. So how do we get back and think about whether or not we're giving a damn with other people to other people? And by doing that, you have to understand what your actions are. For instance, a couple examples. You see people when they're driving down the road, they throw their garbage out in the middle of in the street. And that just drives me crazy. Or there's a cigarette butt. But would you take that cigarette butt and just flick it in your living room? Or would you flick this garbage and no, you wouldn't do it, because now you can internalize something that affects you. So how do we start understanding what we're doing and what effect it might have on the environment or it might have on other people? Once we start realizing that, then we change our habits and we change our attitude. On my website, givadamnbook.com, I have this global accountability pledge. And that's a start. It says, I will respect other people. I will make sure I do all the right things. I will suffer the consequences if I do something wrong, because that's just what we need to do. So you got to start internalizing some of the things that you do externally and saying, okay, I can't do that because that's not the give a damn attitude. So that there's just so many things that you can get that you just have to start thinking, and habits are hard to change.
Habits are hard to change. And I love the idea of this because I think that accountability is really important. We sort of live in this society where, especially as you were saying, because of social media, because of the technology that sort of disconnects us from people, we don't necessarily have that accountability that we would if we were living in those communities that our grandparents and our parents grew up in. So I love the idea of this. And I wonder if for you living where you've lived, because we were talking before we started recording about you living in Louisiana, I wonder if some of that has played a role in sort of that community feel. Because as I said, in the little time that I briefly visited where you're from, there is very much a community feel in some of those areas, very much a feel of if we don't protect each other, when a storm comes, everyone is affected.
I've lived in Louisiana most of my life. And when a hurricane comes through, we all come together as a community to recover. When a major event happens and it's detrimental to us, people come together as a community. But why do we have to come together as a community when a major event happens? Why can't we come together as a community all the time? And you do that by putting together specific events and interacting with people so you know who they are, you can help them. I live in a community right now, it's a new development, and this community has really gotten together, and we have a meet and greet. The whole neighborhood gets together. There must be 40, 50 families. We get together as a meet and greet so we can interact with each other. It's the face-to-face like we did 30, 40 years ago. But let me bring out one point, Crystal, that you thought about accountability. Most people, when something happens to them, they try to be defensive and they try to justify what happened instead of taking responsibility. So what I think is most people, when they do the right thing, they do the right thing. But sometimes people make excuses for doing the wrong thing. So I have this statement that says, people will justify things that they do because in their mind, they think it's right, but it's really wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, and this might be a poor example, you wouldn't go out and just hit somebody in their face or somebody like for that reason, unless you knew that, let's say, well, they did something bad to my family. And so I'm going to justify in my mind to hurt them because they did something bad to my family. That's not how it should work. Right. You can't justify in your mind in doing something that's wrong because you can justify in your mind that's right. We got to get out of that mentality. You see that all the time with domestic violence and all these kind of things. So how do we get around that? Well, again, it's all about thinking about what's in your mind. And I always ask this question to myself: what's the upside in everything that I do? Is there going to be an upside in what I do? And if I can't answer that question, then you can't do it. So those are the kind of things, justify in your mind, ask yourself, what's the upside in everything I'm doing? If you can't answer it correctly, then don't do it.
That's such a great thing for people to ask themselves, because it forces you to stop and actually think about the thing that you're going to do rather than just reacting. I love this.
Right. So I wish I could take credit for that, but I learned that from a friend of mine.
That's okay. I am happy that you learned it so you could share it with us, because I think that's genius. Your friend is a genius.
Well, I've learned a lot from a lot of people. I can't take credit for a lot of things that I do because I learned based on my experiences, and over the years, I've gone through, everybody's been through some tough times. And so I've learned to adapt from those tough times. And I've upset people. And, I've been through my first marriage didn't work out. I could have done things differently. It's all part of the learning process and getting to be better as a human being. And if we get better as a human being and we do the things that we're supposed to do, I always ask this question too. Why are you on this earth? Why did God put you here? And if you don't believe in God, why are you here? And my answer, most people think that they can't answer that question. Most people can't answer. And I said, well, I'm here because God put me on this earth to serve other people. And by serving other people, I serve myself. But they get it in reverse. They don't do it with the idea that there's something in the benefit for me. They do it because it helps other people. And guess what? It always comes back to you much greater than what you did to help other people. It's karma. I mean, it's just the way the world works, and it's been very beneficial.
I love that. And it's so true, because the more you give, I think the more open you are to the receiving, right? And when you're not in the habit of giving, whether it's time, energy, finances, whatever it happens to be, you tend to be really closed off, and you don't notice when people are trying to give back.
Right. And the big key in all this is when you give, you should never expect anything in return. Right. It will always come back, but don't expect it. And if you expect it, that becomes a self-centered attitude. You can't do that. And over time, you're going to get much greater in return than what you gave. And it's happened to me. It's happened to so many different people.
Yes, absolutely. I love this. I do want to be respectful of your time, though. And I typically ask a couple of questions of all of my guests who come on the podcast. Are you game to answer a few questions?
Absolutely.
So the first question is, what inspires you?
That's a question. I can't say it's hard to answer, but what inspires me is the ability to take what I've learned in my 65 years of life and to take that and help other people with what they need to do to be successful. Because I moderate CEO roundtables. I've done it for 8 years. I get so much satisfaction about, hey, I've just learned this over my years as an entrepreneur, and helping them and giving them an idea that they take and they can run with it, and it's helped them substantially. That's very inspirational to me, is to just help other people and provide ideas so they can take and run with it and be successful at it.
That's awesome. And I love this, because one of the things that I'm constantly telling my clients is, you don't know what you don't know. And if you've never been in those shoes, if you've never experienced that thing before, you don't have that knowledge. So having someone who's been there, who's walked that path and maybe has experienced it before and can give you some of that advice is helpful, because they can teach you what you don't know.
Right. And the key behind that is you need to know what you don't know, so you can absorb that information and not be defensive that, somebody else is smarter than you. I always try to hire people that are much smarter than me and just let them do their job because they're really good at it. So, and it makes me look good. And I don't do it for that purpose, but everybody wins from it.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, this is awesome. Okay. If you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh boy, I'd probably start earlier in life to give a damn. Because I really wasn't aware of everything that was going around me, because I was just in this mode of doing and not knowing what effect my actions might have had on other people. So I would have I wish I had learned this a lot earlier, and then I could have been more successful for other people.
That's such a great answer. I love that. Okay. If you could have a conversation with anyone, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question. The thing that came to mind to me originally was Aristotle, because he had these 11 quotes. And I just learned about all these 11 quotes, and I don't know them, to be honest with you. But I would have a conversation with Aristotle because he was on the forefront of what I would call a person who give a damn, because of all the 11 quotes that had an effect on a lot of people. So that would be the first thing. Aristotle, have a conversation about how he knew all this so many years ago and how his ideas still work today in terms of helping people.
Sure. I love that. And, you've got me thinking now, because back then it was like this original idea. Yep. Now I feel like we're kind of surrounded by all of these ideas that came from people in history, and we're just adapting them to where we live now. But back then, people must have thought at some point, like, this guy is just out of his mind because he has this concept. We know now some of it was 100% accurate, but back then they had no way of knowing.
He was a great philosopher. He taught a lot of people, and his teachings are still relevant today. And his quotes that he came up with so many years ago are still relevant today. And we need to get back to that, actually, because I think we've gotten away from it.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, this is amazing. Okay, the last question is, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness means to me is when I see someone smile because their life has changed. I see people having a fun time. Happiness to me is when someone is successful because I've had an influence on their life. Happiness is a newborn baby. That's the most fascinating event that I've ever been through. Coming into the world, it's just everything that portrays to a human being successful and realizing their purpose in life, and then me helping them with that purpose in life.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love that you brought up babies, because I have to tell you, I do not have children, but literally everyone I know has had children in the last 5 or 10 years, all of my friends, all of my family. And every time I see a baby picture, it just like lights up my soul, even though I don't have kids myself, even though, I don't necessarily plan on having them. Anytime I hold one of the babies, anytime I see one of the babies, there is just some sort of light that happens in people when babies are involved. So I love that you brought that up too, because I think like it's hard not to smile when you're around a baby.
Oh, I know it. And they're very, what's the word? They're just free flowing. Babies do things that are unbelievable. But, it brought up a point that everything that we do in life creates a moment of truth. We can either make it positive or we can make it negative. And the more moments of truth that we can make positive has a significant effect on people's lives. So everybody in this world needs to create a moment of truth that can be positive, because then the world will change in a very positive way. And we're going down this path that I think is just not there. It's become a negative path, and we got to turn around and make this a positive path. So everybody out there today, create your moment of truth, because it brings a reflection of happiness on people's lives.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's the perfect place to end it, because I think that's great advice for everyone who is listening. So thank you so much for joining me today, Mark. This has been an amazing conversation.
You've been terrific, and I really appreciate you doing a great job in terms of bringing this to forefront and making people happy. So I appreciate you having me on today and your podcast for happiness.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who is listening. Of course, as I said, I will post in the show notes the links to Mark's book, to the website, to everything that he does on social media, so that you can follow as well and get in touch with him, and go out and create your moment of joy and happiness and truth, because that is like the best piece of advice we could possibly give you today. So thank you for listening, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.